We go on horses. So thank you for coming this evening. Tonight is a pretty special lecture because we're talking about the architecture of the flat space, right? The space that's the outdoor room that's framed by buildings, right? So plazas are important to our, we talk a lot about our third spaces in the built environment for architects, planners, landscape architects, urban designers. We talk about the role of our civic space, right? And the third spaces are usually the space that, it's usually defined by sociologists by our space that we live in, the space that we work. But it's our third spaces of the social spaces of collision that we interact, right? And that's in the modern version, right? So today we're going to dive deep into the cultural space of the plaza. So tonight's lecture is entitled Ritual Spaces of Genizaro Plazas. So this lecture tonight is endowed by the Andrew W. Decker Endowed Memorial Lecture, supported annually through a scholarship fund to the School of Architecture and Planning based on the following criteria. A visiting speaker, which is not necessarily Chris, and we'll talk about Chris's role, but we have community members talking about their connected experiences in plazas, right? Who will technically have an expertise in a place of worship, religious architecture, or architecture of featured structure, emphasis, or expresses the structure. And we're breaking the rules tonight because we're not talking about the structure. We're talking about the physical cultural landscape of the plaza, right? So that's important. We have, actually, I want to acknowledge, we have some guests from the University of Texas, San Antonio, who are here at a field school on historic preservation. So if you could raise your hand to be acknowledged, because we're glad you're here. They came all the way from San Antonio. You were probably at Acoma today? Where were you today? Okay, but you had been to Santa Fe, to Acoma, correct? Okay, so you've been to Acoma. You were in Cornuela on Saturday with us. So, okay. So I just want to acknowledge we have some historic preservation folks from University of Texas, San Antonio School of Architecture. So we have a special lineup today because we have Chris Wilson, who's emeritus from landscape architecture, who I admire as a mentor, who influenced a lot of my writing and what I think about in terms of public space. So Chris is going to give a context of Genizaro ritual space, and then we're going to launch into our guests to engage in a conversation that will open it up for questions. So I'd like to introduce. Is it okay now? No?
It's all your voice probably projects loud enough without the mic.
Put it, what?
You probably can project loud enough without the mic.
Okay.
I think it might be the mic picking up.
Okay. Sorry. So we'd like to introduce Chris Wilson, is a Regent Professor of Landscape Architecture, emeritus, and was the founding director of the Historic Preservation Regionalism Program.
Yes.
That's a big deal. He led the 5-year research initiative here at the school that yielded the book, The Plaza of New Mexico, about the Pueblo, Hispanic, and Anglo community places of the state. He also contributed to an essay to photographer Miguel Gander's classic book, Nuevo Mexico Profundo, The Rituals of Indo-Hispano Homeland, which I have to say becomes very foundational to the work of Nación Genizaro, which I'm a co-editor of a book in which Miguel is a speaker, in terms of which is an anthology that lays out the history and culture of Genizaro communities. So I'm going to introduce the panelists who will join us after Chris's context presentation. We have Delilah Trujillo from the village of Abiquiu. The Pueblo de Abiquiu, who's a dancer, and her family is very closely connected to the village of Abiquiu. Chavela Trujillo, her sister, who's also connected to the Genizaro Pueblo de Abiquiu. We have Miguel Torres, who's hermano penitente, will be share his connection to being a hermano penitente de Santa Cruz, but also a descendant of the Genizaro community of Rancho de Taos. We have Clarice Romero, who will be talking about the Genizaro history of the Plaza de Abiquiu, not Abiquiu, the Plaza of San Miguel del Vado, which is the community of San Miguel del Vado is a Genizaro community out on the Pecos Basin. And then we'll also have Gary Cook Medina, who's recently has a book that was film. He's a filmmaker that had a film recently featured in the Santa Fe Film Festival called the Genizaro Experience. That's also been accepted for the Red Nation Film Festival that will be featured in the fall in Los Angeles. So with that, let's introduce Chris. Thank you.
I think you took my talk.
Oh, shoot.
I could wing it, but I'm trying to keep it concise.
Anybody that knows me, that's classic.
Yeah, so Moises, I equally respect your work, and I've been very impressed by your teaching, by your research initiatives here, by the recent publications. And so I'm particularly honored that you invited me to take part today. And I'll just note that this is kind of a bookend to a session that was held here just before the pandemic. I think it was February 2020, the launch of the book Nación Genizaro. And that's, kind of a landmark and a watershed publication. So it's nice to come back to it with this session. I recognize a number of the scholars of this recent generation of Genizaro scholarship here, but as Moises said, he's asked me to give a bit of historical background for those of you that for whom this is a new topic. The Spanish term Genizaro is borrowed from the Turkish word janissary, which meant subjugated people who were deployed as military auxiliaries. In New Mexico, the term and the ethnic identity Genizaro developed in the mid to late 1700s to describe detribalized, Hispanicized Native Americans. This reciprocal raiding and warfare and slave trade between the Spanish colony of New Mexico and the surrounding nomadic tribes led to Native Americans entering Spanish households and communities as slaves, servants, and the landless poor. As this Indo-Hispano population grew in such urban barrios as the Barrio Analco on the south side of the Santa Fe River and Atrisco here in Albuquerque on the west side, many of these Genizaros who didn't have land petitioned for land grants, which they received from the governor in Santa Fe, who positioned their new communities at the perimeter of Spanish settlement to protect against the nomadic Indian raids. Census records and court records by the late 1700s demonstrate the rise of an ethnic self-identification of Genizaro in a kind of oppositional stance to the discrimination that they experienced from the population that styled themselves as pure Spanish. Genizaros constituted about a third of the Spanish colony by 1821, the time of Mexican independence, when the new Mexican Republic prohibited the elaborate Spanish ethnic terminology, including the term Genizaro. Yet this identity was kept alive for over 150 years through family oral traditions and in the community rituals that we'll be discussing this evening. The working class Indo-Hispano population in New Mexico went by many names: Coyote, Color Quebrado, Mexicano, Pachuco, Cholo, and finally in the 1960s, Chicano. These books give a sense of the evolving scholarship and cultural identities of New Mexico. The Chicano movement, which peaked around 1970, but still exercises a great influence on many people's thinking, emphasized a mythic Aztec homeland, Aztlan, in the US Southwest, which unified Mexican-American working class in opposition to discrimination by white Anglo-America. Yet such scholars as Francis Swadesh, the second book, and Benito Cordova and Esteban Arellano, the next book, countered the kind of universalizing, overarching ideology of the Chicano movement through their studies of the specifics of local New Mexico history. Cordova, who was from Abiquiu, described the traditions and rituals of his home village in 1973 and wrote, while the villagers today think of themselves as Hispanos, they are still aware of their Genizaro origins and take pride in these roots. Well, Arellano's magazine, La Herencia, which he published from 1994 to 2009, provided a very important vehicle for new scholarship and for the recording of the family oral traditions. The next three books, from the upper right to the two on the next line, published between 1996 and 2003, anthropologist Sylvia Rodriguez, photographer Miguel Gandert, and his frequent research partner, and now Moises's research partner, the folklorist Enrique Lamadrid, documented the pivotal community rituals of Los Matachines and Los Comanches. Let's just pause and note that 20 years ago, Gandert and Lamadrid used the term Indo-Hispano rather than what's become the more specific term of Genizaro in the current scholarship, but basically talking about the same population. The final two edited volumes at the lower right, published in 2019 and 2020 respectively, reflect the vibrant current generation of scholars of the Genizaro experience and of the closely related concept of querencia, communities grounded in and caring for a beloved homeland. Well, we're here in an architecture school. I'm a scholar, and so that's in part, what you get when you come here to UNM. Another part is one theoretical concept that I'll share with you. We're a school of architecture, and so we deal with the relationship of society to space and place. And the term that I find most useful in making that link between space and society is the situational frame, the social situational frame. That's a concept developed by the anthropologist Edward T. Hall and Claudio Lomnitz Adler, which links recurrent patterns of human social interaction to specific physical settings. We don't invent how we're going to interact with other people every time we interact with somebody. We learn how to interact growing up in a culture. We're walking down the sidewalk, we see a friend coming up, we both start slowing down, we both start reading cues. Is that person busy? Am I busy? Are we going to slow down? Are we going to talk? Are we just going to nod? How's the conversation going to go? What kind of greetings are there? How long do we spend? How do we read their body language and move on? That's a very simple situational frame. But these situational frames typically include a situational dialect or vocabulary, nonverbal body language, sequences of interaction, an appropriate time and typical physical setting for the activity, and in some cases, specialized clothing, formalized rituals, and rules for behavior. The Mass, which we're seeing in the upper left, with its formulaic ritual, the priest behind the altar, at this point, pre-Vatican II, with his back turned to the congregation in their Sunday best clothing facing forward, is a particularly formal social frame. The women and girls socializing to one side and the men and boys to the other side in front of the church after services here at El Cerrito on the Pecos River in 1941 are more informal, yet still patterned social interactions. The situational frame of men gathering together in a sunny place on the plaza was conscious enough that it had a name, La Resolana. A place of dialogue, a place of telling jokes, a place of philosophizing and discussing the future of the community. The women typically left more quickly after Mass than the men to head home, where the situational frames of childcare and rearing, preparing and serving meals, making and washing clothing were concentrated. Now, in the Catholic Church and Catholic ritual, the key ritual is the Mass, of course, enacted inside the church. But as long as you start with the Mass, this can sometimes lead to a procession, projecting devotion into the community, a Corpus Christi procession following a Mass that goes out into the community and circulates through a community and then comes back, or a similar Mass that circulates out to the irrigation ditch to bless the waters as they're first led in the spring, or a funeral procession after a funeral Mass to a cemetery, or what we're seeing on the lower right is following a wedding Mass, and the newly married couple in the community are processing from the sanctification of the Mass in the church to the village or parish hall for the wedding celebration. Such a matrix of church, plaza, and ritual celebration was essential to sustaining community identity from one generation to the next. So I would just like to sketch three types of Genizaro rituals and their physical settings before we turn to our panelists' experiences and observations. The rise of Genizaro self-identity in the late 1700s intertwined with the development of the Penitente Brotherhood. Just as the Genizaro land grants were located at the periphery of Spanish settlement, Penitente Moradas, a small chapel, a lodge meeting room, sometimes a storage room, were typically positioned at the edge of a village and sometimes even out of sight of the village, up a canyon or at the edge of the forest. Good Friday reenactments of the Passion of Christ by the brothers of the Penitente Lodge enacted the Passions of Christ and led to the development of an associated ritual landscape of a Via Crucis, or Stations of a Cross, climbing to a Calvario, Mount Calvary. This ritual landscape type was present not only at Moradas, such as this one at Abiquiu, but also in Good Friday pilgrimage routes to Tome Hill, south of Albuquerque, or to the Santuario de Chimayo, a Pueblo and later Genizaro sacred site. And a final ritual, danced in New Mexico and Mexico, at Pueblo and Hispanic communities, the folk drama of Los Marachines symbolically engages the history of colonization, of the meeting and mingling of Native and Spanish peoples. Listing the cast can perhaps suggest some of the complexity of this drama. There are the many hooded, mysterious Marachines, a monarch sometimes referred to as Moctezuma, La Malinche, a historical translator between the Aztecs and the conquistador Cortes, played in this case by a young girl in her white First Communion dress. Two clown figures, Los Abuelos, the grandparents, and a toro, or a bull representing Spain. I won't, even try to unpack the symbolism, but you get a sense, it's a dynamic and profound grappling with the history of colonization. The dance is usually performed in the village plaza. But if the plaza is no longer clearly defined by buildings, community spectators reinforce the perimeter. So, we think of plaza as, well, buildings around it, and it's this clear geometric space, but plaza, can be a synonym for community. It can be a synonym for the village, for the population. I've been in New Mexico communities that are actually cordilleras, they're linear settlements. And someone will say, I'll meet you at La Plaza. And I'll say, where is that? Well, let's say it's over next to the church, or it's not, there's a place within the community that doesn't have to be a geometric defined place, but it's recognized as the place of community, the place of gathering, La Plaza. In other communities that have been engulfed by recent suburban development, Matachines processions annually reassert Genizaro identity. Here in the East Mountain area on the lower left, or along the Atrisco Acequia in Albuquerque, just west of the Rio Grande. And I'll say I'm focusing in my comments and we're focusing on the plaza and the ritual here, but there are other social organizations and institutions, probably foremost the Ditch Association of the Acequia, that interweaves with the public space and interweaves with the celebration to reinforce and sustain community. I think I said that this was the last ritual. There is actually one more. I got ahead of myself, and I think you will want to hear this one as well. It's equally rich. Also danced in both Pueblo and Genizaro communities, Los Comanches recounts the local history of raiding between the most powerful of the nomadic tribes, the Comanches, and Spanish villages. The very history which gave rise to the Genizaro population and identity in the first place. Where this drama of raiding, of capture and ransom of community members is enacted on horseback, as in Alcalde near Espanola on the upper right, community members and their pickup trucks form a large Plaza de Armas on the edge of the village. The dances on New Year's Day in Ranchos Tataos begin at dawn in front of the plaza and its famous church, but soon begin a day-long circuit through the contiguous villages of Ranchos and Talpa. At 8 or so stops, the buildings of extended family compounds join with dancers, family members, and a few supporters who have followed along in a caravan, define a more intimate dance space, a temporary placita. Here, and these bottom two images are in Talpa, that connected village. Here in Talpa, as in other communities, shared meals unite the dancers and supporters in community. So these, in brief, are the physical settings and the rituals associated with Genizaro identity. And we're very fortunate that Moises has convened this gathering and assembled our panel of people who have been active in these rituals, active in their communities, active in efforts to conserve their plazas and keep their communities vital. So I'll ask them to come up now for our discussion. Should we be using a microphone, or are we okay?
So I have
If you have one here, and we can use the other one for the one. How is that? That good? Okay, well, thank you all for being here. It's really good to see one of you on the rest of you. And I think Moises has asked you to talk about your experience, your position and roles in the communities, your, activity through the rituals and in other ways, in the vitality of your communities. And so I think that it's, go in turn and let each of you, address that. I mean, you're here as people who have made that an important part of your life and maybe thought about it in your community, to your communities. And so the list I would do first.
Hello, everybody. I'm from a community called Something with the Follow. It was one of the last Genizaro establishments ordained by the Spanish government in the late 18th century. The plaza there was a site of a very rich dynamic history that created like a hybrid pleasure similar to other communities. This community was settled by people from Genizaro, the little town that was on the other side of the river of Santa Fe, which continuously, its members continuously left, searching for a place to become a landlord, because that means the Genizaro, or slave plantations, right? So many of them were attracted to these frontier pathways, like the Maritime Highway, which is often called the gateway between the plains and the Central. Our community was close to what historians called Comancheria. Comancheria was a little bit further south, so we had a lot more intimate contact with the Comanche tribe. And many of them came to live in San Genizaro as translators and as guides, and also as people to help fend off the raids by the Apache, because we had a very complicated relationship with both. Going to live with one, it's going to go with the other. And so the first settlements were carried out by people from Genizaro, as well as other people who consider themselves to be Spaniards, but more than likely they on this than Spanish. And throughout its time in existence, it was the population was augmented by more of these like-minded people from other communities in Mexico and sometimes they were populations and places like that. Our plaza, most plazas that you probably see here, they are completely encircled with roads of village square of some sort. Our plaza was a little bit out of the ordinary because it had openings at several locations. They had a courthouse, they had convents, they had, but most importantly, a customs house, because people coming from Missouri or from Chihuahua would always have to enter the San Miguel to pay taxes on the taxes. So there was a building there where people could go in and do their tax. So what happened is that because it wasn't often the police fights like that there, a lot of people got away marketing or so the CPS soldiers were split in the San Miguel, and that kind of changed the dynamics of the people that here. They brought with a convent and actually a school run by a French priest. It was one of the few places in Mexico where you could get an education. And outside of the state of we were very well read and and after these changing dynamics, you can see like two different or an evolution of culture. People first in the area, so we live when you go there, the people there, the women wear one way, the men wear two ways, And the women keep their face differently and on the cheeks and on the nose and on the forehead. And they can be seen very well from the real big organ on the head. And we speak of dances that imitate, these are American users, so they're not sure that we them. But it seems like we don't confident in there. These dances and practices were kind of snubbed out or blended. So as they were preserved in places like front of the house and everything, where we live, we can only hear those songs and know by the water from the teacher. That's the aspect of that culture of that time of warfare and violence that we have connected with. So the plaza there is others, such as the place where we had to repel from people from Texas coming into playing in Mexico. We're happening in 241 in Texas Exposition. And these people came from Texas and they basically got lost. So they were captured in what we now call the Genizaro. And they were imprisoned in the Plazas. They were kept there a few days after it was decided that only the lieutenants or captains should be harmed, and the rest should be taken south to Mexico City to face retribution or justice. But while they were staying there, the soldiers reported being terrified because during the night the people there were harassing them and trying to, do stuff to them inside, They basically wanted to kill all, but they were saved by the local police. And things like this made San Miguel a very rich, dynamic place to live. Soon after that, the train came through, people bought the Santa Fe to Pica Railroad. They came through, and it completely changed the way things were in San Miguel. It brought a heavily Anglo influence into the area to where our only traditions that we can look at now are heavily Catholic. The most popular traditions seem to be like the ones that you mentioned, the procession during speaking, or the crowning of the baby of the Blessed Mother. That's done in the evening. And we have pilgrimages for the stations of the cross up to the those traditions, even though they are a mark of colonization, they seem to be the traditions that kind of hold us together, bring us back to where our family is and to experience things together. I'm not sure.
That's wonderful. And then, as you hand the microphone over, many rich things. I think your very last point's an important one. Local traditions can be repressed, other traditions can take their place. A community can take those over and make them theirs, give them meaning, and find a central place in the community as you suggested.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm Miguel Torres. I am Genizaro. I have connections to many northern New Mexico communities. So I grew up and lived in the Espanola Valley. I'm really tightly connected to the Santa Cruz de la Cañada region. But my father's roots are both Mora and Rancho Taos, Alba. So I'm connected all over, and I feel like connected, amongst northern New Mexico people. But today I'm here not representing, but I'm here to speak on behalf of area and what that means to me, because I'm not here representing Mora. So the Amanda is actually known as but I don't really represent here, so I'm just speaking one. But I didn't really prepare anything because I wanted to see how the flow of this conversation would go. Figure that out here. And I noticed immediately, when I had I'm like, yeah, no, that's basically it. My goal at the time is to get come a long way. So early on, yes, I believe it was really good. And so it was adapting the Catholicism in a manner way that made them feel connected to their views of spirituality. And I think a lot of that was so having the privilege of being inside Morada and in certain things, really it's an escape from our modern world. Just the structure, the construction, the preservation of, most people have dirt floors. They're made of buildings, there's all these great structure aspects of how they're built, how they're preserved. Really push you back in time. And the evolution of the Hermandad as a whole is not exactly as it was from the inception, right, in the 1700s, 1800s. There's been this evolution of modernization where the Hermanos weren't even really withstand the Catholic Church until about the 1930s. We were basically savages, one word, like the foot, right? Very archaic. A lot of those terms were said about us. But anyway, we participate in Rosario, we pray for the deceased, the sick, the dead, the dying, in many forms of fashion. We still have a very tight, close connection to, I think from where I'm at, the Pueblo. Yeah, so we still tightly connected to the Pueblo of Santa Clara. So we often get called to pray a rosary for deceased members of the Santa Clara Pueblo. And it's very, very interesting and special connection. So, why do I mention that? Because it keeps us connected socially. Our in a community format, right? We make friendships. We have these ties to people in these communities that have been long lasting, right? So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what we do. I mean, today we don't act as much as we did in the past. We still have certain positions we're doing a lot. We have one position called enfermero, which means the person whose responsibility is to attend to or know about sick people, right? It's not usually the same way because we're in more modern time, but that person would go out into the community and check on elderly people. Do some of the elderly need their wood chop? Do they need help paying the crops, the animals, whatever may be the situation? So the hermanos have always played a really tight role in community, and we still do. It's just from a different perspective. But I guess at the core, what I could say about probably everything that we're speaking about here, and that connection is that as a native New Mexican, northern New Mexican, it's interesting how it's been a process to really understand and know that these things existed, right? I probably did many things, even as an hermano, that I didn't realize what the context really was. And it's a process of being conscious and opening your eyes and learning and listening. And it's through that community connection that we all have in all our different ways that we start to learn and take advantage of what community is and how it's tied, especially to this topic of being living plaza and space.
Yeah. And after passing the microphone along, beautiful the way you tied into Clarissa's observation about, Catholic rituals being very much, part of a mutual spirit and embrace and share. And then the point of the relationship between the Genizaro, the Hispanic, and Pueblo communities. I was talking about, the community, the cause of the ritual, but there are these networks that go out into other villages. And Sylvia Rodriguez's work is, I'm sure but other people can know, had her Martinez book up there. She has another one about Sapiens. And it's all about those being shared institutions between, in her case, House Pueblo and House Village and Lancaster House, in order to share resources together amicably, and also to recognize historic principal relationships between communities.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to take all my, I could use a whole hour on this topic, but I'm also the chairman of my local acequia. I sit on the board of Greater Acequia Association, right? And what's interesting is that kind of like an underground scene, like we have monos, especially now during renting season, which is the main time of our spirituality. Basically, we migrate at night and visit different moradas and different communities, and it's a really even in that respect, we're still leaving that community.
Yeah, you probably know Moises's article in the Perencia book, where he talks specifically about that, the relationship between the community rituals, the dish associations, and the way in which people coming up in the community invest themselves in the spirituality and thereby in the well-being of the community. And in your example of taking these multiple roles of commitment to the community.
Yeah, and I was going to start with basically quoting that's the cyclic events that happen, which the Hermanos are very much involved in, that happen in Mexico. Right? So I don't think you know that, but yeah.
We'll give you more chances.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gary.
I was in there because I don't know. And anyway, including the slavery in Mexico, but also the recognition of people and the faith of it. All the time. And he said, all about the 50s. I have a vision of talking about the I have to start with the court, very useful part of the community. This is my thought to do this that I found along the way. And there's a plaza. In the center of the plaza is the church. It's on the fire. And there's also walls around. This eye wall is around for you. The church is the spirit is also for the best purpose. So these places for ritual places. So it's somewhat model that really. Thursday, we want to have a coffee. We're not even sure it's not like that. And, here in the only talking about the house. That's how I hold the coffee for the day. But there's none walking to church. People are walking to church. So people is gathering. Is church. So, yeah. Very important part, right? First memory that I have. Now, as a women, you say all the time, you think it's from wow. Everybody, trust it. Church, faith, all, you. Church, you have asked for faith. You, go church, all, in space, mission, ask, you. So I was finding all of these people. All of these experiences that flashing back in my childhood. And once is what I found was intriguing. And these are very different than the people. It is a celebration of duality. But about duality. Imagine yourself walking down a long highway, right? People to the right. Now imagine that highway with two bike lanes. And the people who walk. Hopefully, here, one line is Spanish, the other is Greek. Well, the people who follow it. That's very important. Is each of the components do different things. The province, is gone, is gone. People move. Don't want to do that. And war. Celebrate. And it's true. All the celebrations.
Oh, thank you, Gary. I should pass the mic on. Thanks again for great observations. I wonder, is your film with initial experience available in some form? Is it on YouTube or is it on some website that people can see it?
Not at the moment because we're in the beginning stages, so we just had a Saturday film festival. And we're all involved and it's so great because we want a humanitarian film award there. And so what we're doing is we're moving along to the film circuit, in the film festival. And then eventually the goal is to get it on Netflix and Amazon.
Okay, well, that sounds great. And if you have a showing here at UNM, be sure and let us know, and we'll get the word out through all the, through, voices and through our email list. I really look forward to seeing it. So Delilah and Delilah, you're Delilah, thank you for coming down from Abacus, north of Espanola. Welcome, and share some of your thoughts and experiences with us.
So today I'm probably share a lot of my experience growing up in the festival, and what that consists of, including our school. But one really important word that I learned here is that really want to that side and to what our festival and our father is about, and why it is so important to us. So we have Ferencia in many different forms. What that is it's best described as a feeling which you replace in the community and love. So we can see Ferencia in many forms. We talked about the hermanos, but we also talk about how you want it. Those are the women who get together. And in Attitude, we actually have two models, one on each side of our pueblo. On one side of our pueblo, the more southern side is where our hermanos gather, and they have, their prayers and their rituals that they want there. Our Comandantes gather on the opposite of our pueblo, and so these are the women of the pueblo. They get together to hold prayers, gatherings, rituals, and there's some of the few women that are allowed into the morada with the hermanos to help cook for them and help for them. So I think that is help. And that's one way that they show Ferencia to and to something else would be those obsequias. So we actually have an ancient obsequia in Attitude, and it's called Espina de los Molinos. So that is it means around the edge. And so it runs on the edge of our federal, our federal is on the hill. And this one is along the edge of it. And it actually went down into some like canyon where there was a mill, and I think there's mill there also. So you also see, that community differencia within our social systems where our culture and being Northern New Mexican and being in South, we have a tie to help and assist and putting it very common to help all of the communities. So something else I will touch on is our Spanish fiesta, Santa Rosa de Lima, and next we will continue with our native Pizza also. We have two celebrations. And our Santa Rosa de Lima fiesta is in August. At this fiesta, we celebrate our Spanish heritage. So, and it ties into our native also. We have old ruins that used to be a church, probably about 2 miles away from the current pueblo. That is where we hold mass every year. And once mass is finished there in our old ruin, we then hold a procession where we pray the rosary, and we have people walking behind others on horseback. And that kind of depicts our Spanish things. So we have a procession going on all the way along the side, like every year, traffic stops for us. And the road is kind of closed down so we can process and we can be in prayer and go up to our pueblo and enter it, as a community and as one within. That's what we see a lot of the Catholic side come in. And just walking into a pueblo with all the vendors around and a community around and our bells, it's very spiritual and a big connection, back to your community. From there, our horses will form kind of a half circle behind the community members, and we are all people and take place in one prayer together. And then the priest blesses all the people on the horses as well. And then it's time for a fiesta, and we celebrate, and we have music going on. And I talked about vendors. Well, I think it's a very big an important spot on the trading building within the old Spanish. So that ties into our heritage as well. Our community loves to gather in parish hall and have, their bingo and their little classes. So that's really neat. Also, and then the last thing I will say about our festival is it's not just for these 2 feast days, twice a year, but we have our Christmas mass and our Easter mass. And after every mass in the public square, we'll actually do a bonfire, and everyone stays after mass, before mass, to just conversate with each other and come back together as a community, no matter what happened that year, what's going on between, one person and another. It's forgotten there, and all together in the public celebrating and having a good time. So, I'm delighted to feel also I'm the for the advocacy level. I'll be touching more on, I guess, our feast day, which is our indigenous side. And as my sister Chavela was saying, so many of our rituals, so many of the things that we do in our community end up happening in our festival. So it's the same as Gary was saying, we have our church, a big opening in the middle, and then of course our houses that go around this opening, which back in the day would have been used as a barrier, and also a place to gather. So for our indigenous feast days, we actually in Abiquiu had 2 farms. So above the hill in Abiquiu is where our original pueblo started, and that would be in Moki. And up on Moki, there are houses that complete a square. That's where our rituals and dances used to start. Maybe held there many of the time. And so over the years, as we've grown down into the further portion of Abiquiu to where our new church stands, we have kept some tradition by getting our girls dressed. The majority of our teachers are young girls. We will get them dressed up on Moki, get them painted, and we will proceed from Moki down into our property. That way, we know that we can keep both history, both places as a part of tradition. From there, we do our dances in the middle of the pueblo. All the people will gather around, and it's really nice because when you invite people to watch from other pueblos, from other towns, you just tell them, just look for the church. Wait there, because that's where everyone is gonna gather, in the square. So it's really easy to find, where to go, where to wait. And sure enough, you'll see the Genizaro come out and they'll dance. With this dance, a lot of the times we do end up going to a Mayordomo house. However, in some cases, the Mayordomo maybe not have a big house or much space. And so once again, we'll set up tables in the placita. Everybody will gather in the placita, we'll feed in the placita. These placitas are so important. I mean, community really does gather there, as everyone has said, after church. They come out of the church, everyone stands around the placita talking, getting to know one another. We have, so for 4th of July, once again, a lot of our people come into the placita and shoot their fireworks from the placita all together, which is really nice. If you don't have a lot of money to buy a lot of fireworks, come to the placita because everybody else is going to shoot their fireworks. All the kids gather together. The kids learn who their neighbors are. They learn to play together. They learn who their elders are from being here in the middle, seeing their parents talk to one another. They learn to talk to one another. But we do have practice for our Indica. Again, everybody meet in the meet in the Pueblo. Everybody meet in front of the church. We'll just practice there. We don't have to interrupt anybody's space at home. We don't have to try and procure a place to gather. It's already there and it's welcoming to us. It's so important. And many times you can even tell, it's very easy to notice when there's a gathering happening at the church, or we have a gym that's right next to our church, so there'll be weddings or funerals, things like that, and it's very quick and easy to tell who's not from the Pueblo. And it's funny, it's all based on how did they park. We know so well, we park in this very specific manner. So when you come home and there's vehicles and they're parked a little different, you're like, you know that it's not somebody who's from the Pueblo. So these areas, they play an important part. They really do. In bringing the culture together, bringing our families together, and just keeping an eye on your community.
Well, thank you both for the line. You both have a really wonderful sense of space and of the relationship of social life and space. You've got the kind of sensibility that would make you a good student here in the school. I'm just going to invite the members of the panel. If you have comments on what other people said, or questions or follow-ups that you'd like to discuss among yourselves.
I'm sorry, I want to stop because one thing I can say is whenever I'm not in northern New Mexico, let's just say I'm visiting a big city, even visiting a big city, visiting even Albuquerque and living in a space that's not northern New Mexico, right? Basically in the city, it's just very uneasy. We look at houses, right? We've gone down house shopping, you want to say, and it's a neighborhood. I'm like, look, can't live here. I just doesn't feel right.
So I want to comment on that because you mentioned sense of place. And I think that's something that our classes really provide also. There's kids walking around. It's a safe place to walk. We can go, yeah. We can walk up and down to the plaza and to the pueblo. If you want to meet your friend, you can walk down to the pueblo. And we were joking when we were hearing about us, because we live in the square. That's really but, we drive, we could be here in Albuquerque, and the second we hit that half guard and we drive into our pueblo or into our plaza, we're home.
Yeah.
And that is our place. That's where we go, and there's no magnet for bus, but that home period, and so there's no question. Space.
I think that they have a snippet here on the topic. In strategic, there you click on the you're actually one way or another. You go have a relationship. Here, you're all connected in some form or another. So you feel this tension and this kind of
I was just going to touch on, one of the emotional significance that we want to hold. I was just talking to, one of my elders who moved away from our plaza. And our plaza is Basically ignorance because it's been, through so many ravages over the years. And she says she has not gone back because she would not be able to stand seeing the lyrics. And she'd be getting her. So, these places hold a very, very special place in my heart. And like she was saying, this is the place you were born, and this is the place she wants to be buried.
Well, it's interesting because, Ranchos Cotales, which is primarily Comanche, are very relevant to where you're from. We have that Comanche, foundation, where she's from, Robert Mirabal from Talacabo was telling me, he says, out that way in Pecos, that was the best hides. That was the buffalo hides, and they used to hunt. Comanche, we go there and they got more money for the hide because they were the best hide. It was a valuable hunting in that area, right?
Right, there was a whole culture based around the combination of, the Comanche way of life, and the Hispanic things of good life. They accompanied them on hunting trips and for festivals. Initially, you have the fitness program, which used to be mass, 200 room structure with, thousands of people living there. And they have an annual trade fair that every year, I want to be in the fall. And they have trade relationships with the attached. So people from all over the come and trade, primarily women for women, children, for horses and other stuff, but not a lot of tutors and stories, it's probably. But mostly for my kids, it's all, that was the other side of the trade. And as the Comanches got more powerful, they didn't really need the market and of course in thousands now. And the people in these little villages started taking their economy, taking commerce on the road to the east for the Comanche live and video. I mean, this Comanche is very vast, but that's where they had some of the meaning of the country. This constant travel and interacting with each other. A lot of Comanche were married women from time to time, or vice versa. So you say you used to go there, you hear Comanche things mixed in with the Spanish. And these things, as the schools came in and all the structure came in from the border process, they kind of weeded out or snubbed the indigenous thing that we always said, like that old Colombia Genizaro kind of thing was a backward view among my elders. It's only now that we're kind of re-embracing this word and
I think that's a really important point because, see, people talk about Jalisco. And they say, oh, it's Jalisco a nation. It's Jalisco a tribe. In the beginning, it was not a nation, it was not a tribe. Because Genizaro were a mixed group of people, originally warriors, Plains Indians that fought and were taken captive. That's how it began. And over time, it evolved into what most people see is Genizaro will say, oh, slave and house servants. And these are not different, And I think that's a really important distinction because and these girls have evolved, and you see in these communities that you are talking about and showing these maybe pictures of this ethnogenesis that takes place. You see it in the dances and by the way, Macachinas and how they keep it going. And it's very important because the communities, these ritual spaces keep the evolution going. That's what makes people in these it's in the consciousness. It's in the participation, in knowing the dances. You guys do with the choreography there, it's very, very important. I think that's a really important distinction to make to understand with these stories.
Yeah, it's really valuable. I was going to say, to kind of go on that, it's important to know that, back to what Plaza, that most of the communities here in New Mexico were known as Plaza or something, right? And many of these communities have been engulfed by some municipality, right? So for instance, from the Espanola Valley, people just identify, oh, I'm from Espanola. When in reality, they're probably from San Pedro. They might be from La Mesilla or Ranchitos, and those were in the past known as Plaza de Ranchito or Plaza de San Pedro, things like that, right? And that extends through all of the communities. So it's really important to know that, that word plaza is really, really important and has a deep significance.
Absolutely, like Plaza. So in the time left to us, are there a couple of questions or comments from the audience? And do we have a mic? We can. Yeah.
Come along.
You're kind of like, okay.
Can I ask a question? Well, I just want to say hi. My name is Claudia Chavez. I'm from Santa Fe, but also Galisteo. I'm looking at my grandpa, my great grandma, my great grandmother's photograph. She looked different than everybody else in the picture. Simona Barros is her name. So I started research, and San Miguel de Vado is her lineage took me to. So I just wanted to say hi, Prima. Oh, okay. Yeah, so I've done a lot to learn about San Miguel de Vado, and it was once a thriving community, like you said. The Santa Fe Trail went through there, and then it was too busy. So what I understand is the priest said no more going through Vado and moved it to Las Vegas, and we're encouraging people to move to Las Vegas. Is that correct?
Well, there was more raising opportunities for these sheep business people or people that have cattle. So these people would apply for lands in Las Vegas. First, they would take a look there, they're not the cheaper, then Las Vegas, and then further out to San Pedro and more. But yeah, they were smaller communities, but they were all started mainly for that reason, for grazing. And it wasn't until later that Santa Fe really came in and became the largest landowners in the nation.
Yeah.
But something else that Vado does have a very dynamic history from being with the onset with the Genizaro people. And then all the changes that come upon them, because they are at a gateway. They are at a place where people have to come and do exchange. So after a while, they were constantly exposed to, to immigration and leasing. And we kind of lost our indigeneity, I mean, the cultural marks of it, not my DNA, of course.
Right.
Not by accident.
Yeah.
Thank
So maybe right next to you and then over here. So we'll do two final question comments. No, again to you.
I don't need the mic.
Okay.
So you had mentioned something about the Morada. And the women who cook in the one side Morada. Do you know anything about the tradition that are from farming? The women who do this with Chico, it's a completely different. So when I heard it, and I've been trying to find information, do you know any like I believe if you give me information about that? The ceremonies around there.
I think there definitely would affect on the use of Chico because in a lot of cultures now I see what I would call wedding cookies.
Yeah.
That are not necessarily our typical piece of Chico. We make them very differently. They're very different texture, color, shape, and they're made for our fiestas and our feast days and special events. Same point, piece of Chico, I think, are very. You can distinguish them based on what you're from, what community you're from, because they are made differently according to whoever was the main maker and passed that on down, right? So,
Right.
in our household, that search should be only new Chico. And everybody, they're that's in their favorite, and whenever there's any galleries or anything, they call me to grade them. So it is something that is very traditional and
And a little bit of a secret as far as making them in the morada.
but we did not ever make them in the law.
Oh.
The moradas were more a place of prayer. And so when we say the women were on the north side, a lot of theirs was in prayer also. However, they would bring food to the morada, not necessarily
Prepared.
prepare it there.
Eric Romero at Plazas University, he's actually doing research on the tradition that we're going to read in the book. And Morada, so when you mentioned the idea, no, I was just gonna say Eric Romero is one of my mentors. Okay.
Everyone's doing that. So, I was gonna,
Great study though, he goes to all the different places, try all of them.
Right.
I was gonna add 2 points to that, so like, you said, you can kind of distinguish, this with people from the communities, you definitely can, like, every time, you know, lots of vendors, like Native American vendors will sell their engage at different gas stations or side road places, and I always know when I don't even have to ask them, I know when that person's from the lingo. Exactly, something England very specific, you know, and then back to the Morada thing, so just like many of the federal, many of the communities, in northern Mexico, Moradas have functions, fiestas, things like that nature, and we always feed people after, right? It's the same thing that you'll find in any pueblo. You go to a wake or Rosario, they send us home with bags full of food, you know, in Thanksgiving, but they also feed us afterwards, so that's another important, interesting form of community, and it's basically universal among northern Mexico.
So a last question or comment. Yeah, I think we would want to wrap it.
And Sally Mendes, Genizaro, Martinez, move. You mentioned about the Guayana that would not go back to the because of its condition. Is there anything that we have in Mexico or Pueblo that it can be rebuilt or restored? I asked for a personal reason. Last night, I found out that my property in Berlin was very close to the Plaza de I was thinking of that, so I can stand to see. So that's my curiosity, and you said that, is there anything that it should be rebuilt, restored?
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because that's exactly what I was thinking with it. Because we are working on getting her and her family involved in a nonprofit organization where they can accept, you know, donations, where people will want to, you know, donate, so they can, you know, get a tax write off the charity, it works out for everyone. And as soon as we get them settled with that, we're doing that with the individual by the name of Dion Bobby Montoya. He is the nephew of the Montoya. And if he's interested in, you know, helping all the areas in northern New Mexico, you know, get their historical preservation important. So we contacted several groups aside from that, and the Daughters of the American Revolution, because of our connection with the Revolutionary War in Spain, are willing to come and, you know, mark our historic areas. We also set up a Facebook page where we have the cleanups, or we're going to start making our own history in the summer. We retreat clearing and you know, just keeping up cash. And we've attracted quite a following of people that are now interested in fixing these things up again. But like as you say, yours is on private property, yours as well. So maybe I can get you in touch with Leon. And maybe you and some of your colleagues or family members can set up a nonprofit to get money to your project.
Okay, well, you know, wonderful comments. That was a good round of applause for Moises. For his work and for meeting us. And Clarissa, Miguel, Gary, Pavella, and Delilah, Wonderful, rich comments. Thank you so much.
I do that all the time. All the time.